Three white cops pulled up a black woman's skirt in the middle of an empty street and burst out laughing. But they had no idea she used to train special forces in tactical combat, and seconds later, two of them were down on the pavement. Ava walked through the center of Maple Bridge, her sneakers softly echoing on the quiet pavement. Stores were closed, streetlights cast long shadows, and the night air was still. A squad car crept slowly behind her, headlights dimmed. Inside were three officers: Delaney, a young cop with an unsettled bitterness in his eyes; Marks, broad-shouldered, always eager to assert dominance; and Jace, quiet, observant, choosing silence. Ava, dressed plainly, carried a worn gym bag casually over her shoulder. Marks studied her closely from behind tinted windows. "She doesn't belong here," Marks muttered under his breath, signaling Delaney to slow down. The car pulled closer, tires crunching softly against asphalt. Delaney rolled his window down, letting a whistle slice through the silence. Ava's steps faltered, but she didn't turn immediately. Her grip tightened slightly on the strap of her bag. The officers exchanged glances. Marks smiled coldly, amused by her hesitation. He leaned slightly from the window, eyes narrow, voice mocking. "Hey, lost your way?" Finally, Ava turned, eyes locking directly onto Marks. No fear, no confusion, only calm, cold awareness. And that was precisely what shifted the mood in the car, instantly silencing their laughter. Ava stood still, eyes fixed calmly on the three officers emerging from the patrol car. Delaney approached first, the grin on his face widening. Marks followed close behind, thumbs casually tucked into his belt, confidence radiating from every step. Jace remained a few paces back, silent and watchful, his expression unreadable. Delaney's voice broke the silence, dripping with mock courtesy. "Need a ride home, sweetheart? Dangerous out here at night." Ava said nothing. Her eyes remained steady, scanning each of them methodically, evaluating their positions and movements with quiet precision. Marks exchanged an amused glance with Delaney, stepping forward deliberately into Ava's personal space, forcing her to shift slightly to maintain eye contact. Marks tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowed in a subtle challenge. "Quiet type, huh? We don't bite." A pause, then a smirk. "Much." Still silent, Ava's gaze hardened, her shoulders squared instinctively. Marks noticed her subtle reaction and laughed softly, clearly entertained by her resistance. His eyes briefly flicked to Delaney, who moved around, partially blocking Ava's path down the sidewalk. Delaney spoke again, his tone sharper, authoritative. "Maybe you should let us check your bag. Standard safety procedure, ma'am. You understand." Ava's eyes shifted slightly towards Delaney. She held her stance, still refusing to respond. Her jaw tensed lightly, enough for Jace, watching from a slight distance, to pick up on the subtle warning signs. He shifted his weight uneasily, sensing an underlying danger. Marks ignored his partner's unease, emboldened by Ava's continued silence. "Seems a bit suspicious, don't you think, Delaney?" Marks said sarcastically, eyes gleaming. "A woman walking alone, late at night, refusing assistance, maybe hiding something." Delaney chuckled, though his laughter had an edge, betraying faint uncertainty. "Could be. Might be wise to conduct a thorough search." He stepped even closer, deliberately positioning himself in Ava's path. Ava remained perfectly still, measuring each move, each gesture. Her silence appeared to irritate Marks, who preferred responses he could dominate. He exchanged another glance with Delaney, who appeared increasingly unsettled, but followed his partner's lead nonetheless. Marks leaned forward slightly, invading Ava's personal space, a smug grin pulling at his lips. "Relax. Won't take more than a minute." Without warning, Marks reached down abruptly, grabbed the hem of Ava's skirt, and lifted it roughly, revealing her legs in a crude, humiliating gesture. Delaney laughed harshly, the sound ringing hollowly through the deserted street. Jace's face tightened, almost imperceptibly, but he remained rooted in place, eyes shifting nervously. Ava's response was immediate and controlled. She took one deliberate step back, smoothing her skirt calmly, her movements precise, almost clinical. When she spoke, her voice was even, devoid of fear or outrage, only cold, measured authority. "You think this is funny?" Marks hesitated for the briefest second, suddenly aware of something dangerous beneath her calm demeanor. Delaney's laugh faded slowly, replaced by discomfort. He took half a step back, uncertain now. Marks regained his bravado, dismissing his fleeting unease. "Lighten up, just a joke." Ava's voice lowered further, the words spoken with chilling confidence. "Walk away, or I make you." Marks froze, the smirk on his face faltering. Delaney visibly paled, glancing sideways to Jace for support, receiving none. Ava's hands, previously relaxed at her sides, shifted subtly, muscles taut beneath the skin. Her stance shifted slightly, balanced, precise. Marks recognized this shift too late, the realization flickering briefly in his eyes. He took another step forward defiantly, unwilling to concede, to appear weak in front of his partners. Delaney, emboldened by Mark's defiance, also moved closer, not comprehending the warning signs, clear in Ava's posture. Jace's voice finally rose quietly, urgently. "Marks, maybe we—" Marks silenced him with a sharp glare, turning back to Ava, eyes narrowed aggressively, challenging. "Or you make us, huh? I'd like to see you try." Ava's eyes flickered briefly, with something resembling pity, then hardened into focused clarity. Marks barely saw her move. In seconds, she had closed the gap, her movements swift, expertly executed. Her palm struck sharply upward, impacting Marks just below his ribs with devastating precision. He gasped harshly, knees collapsing beneath him instantly. Delaney, startled into panicked action, lunged forward, reaching towards Ava clumsily. She sidestepped smoothly, catching his wrist, twisting effortlessly until he buckled, face first into the pavement, crying out sharply. Jace stood motionless, eyes wide, heart pounding. Ava turned slowly, her gaze finding him directly, coldly questioning. Her voice was calm, almost casual, devoid of anger or threat, just a clear, undeniable authority. "I warned you!" 2 officers down, Jace froze completely, breath catching in his throat, trapped under Ava's steady gaze, unable to look away. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence was deafening. Ava's movements were seamless and precise. No hesitation, no wasted energy. Marks lay gasping painfully on the pavement, clutching his ribs. He struggled to breathe, eyes wide with shock. Beside him, Delaney groaned faintly, unable to lift himself from the concrete, his face twisted in disbelief. Only Jace remained standing, frozen at the edge of the sidewalk, hand hovering near his holstered weapon. His fingers trembled slightly, uncertainty clouding his expression. Ava turned slowly toward him, her stance calm, relaxed. Jace's breath quickened, his hand tightening instinctively. Their eyes met. A flicker of recognition sparked suddenly in Jace's face. His gaze locked onto Ava's eyes, struggling to place her. Something deep within his memory stirred, a buried moment resurfacing abruptly, forcing his hand to retreat slowly from the grip of his gun. Ava's voice cut the silence cleanly, precise and authoritative. "Don't." Jace swallowed hard, nodding stiffly. He took a careful step backward, clearly signaling he would not escalate the conflict further. Ava observed him quietly, no emotion evident on her face, no triumph or hostility, just an unreadable calm that unsettled him deeply. Marks coughed painfully, attempting to rise. His elbow slipped, sending him back down with another grunt. Delaney remained motionless, breathing shallowly, eyes barely open, glazed with confusion. Neither man attempted to reach their radios or call for backup. The humiliation and shock had paralyzed them more effectively than any injury. Ava surveyed the scene carefully, her eyes briefly scanning Marks and Delaney, then returning to Jace. He stood completely still, careful not to provoke further action. Ava's expression softened just slightly, a barely perceptible shift, almost resembling disappointment. She shook her head subtly, an unspoken judgment of their actions and their inability to confront consequences. Jace's face flushed with shame, eyes lowering to the ground. He exhaled unsteadily, his posture slumping slightly under the weight of Ava's quiet scrutiny. No words were spoken, but the silence communicated everything: authority, respect, and a finality neither he nor his partners could challenge. Turning away from them deliberately, Ava began walking slowly down the street. She did not run, did not quicken her pace. Each step was measured, steady, and deliberate. The three officers watched helplessly as she moved further away, her silhouette growing smaller against the distant streetlights. Marks finally managed to sit up, gripping his chest tightly. He opened his mouth to speak but could find no voice, no strength to utter a word. Delaney stirred weakly, pushing himself onto one elbow, dazed eyes following Ava's figure until it disappeared around the corner. Jace stood motionless, gaze fixed on the spot where Ava had vanished, still struggling to grasp the moment. He opened his mouth as if to call after her, but no sound emerged. His hand, once poised over his gun, now hung uselessly at his side, fingers twitching faintly. None of them reached for their radios. No one called for backup. No one moved. They were left with only a heavy silence and an unanswered question hanging unspoken in the night air. Who was she? The precinct was unusually quiet the morning after the incident. Officers exchanged fleeting glances, but avoided direct conversation. In a small back office, Captain Ellis leaned forward, staring intently at the personnel file open on his screen, eyebrows knitted with concern. Jace stood stiffly beside him, eyes fixed on the floor, his jaw clenched tightly. Marks sat across the desk, his face pale, shoulders hunched slightly, breathing shallowly from lingering discomfort. Delaney stood near the door, arms crossed defensively, eyes darting nervously from one face to another. Captain Ellis finally spoke, voice low, controlled, edged with disappointment. "You boys picked the wrong woman to mess with." Marks shifted uncomfortably, eyes narrowing in confusion. Ellis turned the screen slightly, showing Ava's military record. Marks stared, face draining of color as he read the details. Ava Cole, former tactical combat instructor, Special Forces Division. Marks swallowed hard, unable to hide the unease spreading across his face. Delaney stepped closer, leaning to read. His eyes widened slightly, lips parting in disbelief. "She trained special ops?" "Correct," Ellis said coldly, turning the monitor back towards himself. "And instead of reporting you, filing complaints, or blasting it on social media, she did nothing." "Nothing?" Delaney echoed weakly, struggling to comprehend. Jace, still silent, stared downward, a faint flush coloring his neck. Ellis's voice grew firmer, more accusatory. "Not a word, which makes this situation worse. Now, there's speculation, whispers." Marks straightened, frustration breaking through his fear. "Speculation about what?" Ellis's eyes locked onto him sharply. "About what you did, and why no one's filed reports. People are asking questions. They think we're hiding something." Marks leaned forward aggressively, his voice rising. "She assaulted us." "No," Jace said quietly, finally breaking his silence. "She defended herself. We provoked—" Marks turned sharply, glaring at Jace with contempt. "Nobody asked you." Ellis stood abruptly, voice raised just enough to command immediate attention. "Enough, Marks. You're suspended. Effective immediately. Delaney, You'll remain on administrative duty pending further review. Marks stared at him in shock, mouth working silently. Delaney slumped against the wall, head bowed. Jace met the captain's gaze briefly, nodding in reluctant acceptance. Days passed, tension thickening within the precinct. Conversations ceased abruptly when Marks or Delaney entered the room. Officers who once joked openly now avoided their eyes, subtly shifting their chairs away, creating quiet isolation. Marks, previously loud and domineering, became withdrawn, eyes frequently darting towards doors and hallways as if expecting judgment. Delaney, no longer arrogant, moved silently through corridors, visibly shrinking into himself, avoiding contact. Only Jace remained unaffected outwardly, though his silence spoke volumes. Colleagues observed him warily, unsure of his allegiances. He walked through the precinct with careful, deliberate steps, his gaze steady but unreadable. Rumors spread quietly, questions lingering unanswered, suspicions growing deeper. Each officer carried their uncertainty privately, no one daring to confront the truth openly. Without formal accusations or public complaints, the lack of action created an unbearable pressure. No consequences had officially been announced beyond Mark's suspension. Yet, internally, each of the three men had already begun to face judgment. Silent, unavoidable, emanating from every colleague's glance, every whispered conversation halted abruptly in their presence. Though Ava had made no public move, her silence was more powerful than any spoken accusation. It left them exposed, unsettled, stripped of authority, haunted by the quiet fear of repercussions still unseen. Ava sat at an outdoor table at a cafe downtown, her coffee half empty, eyes calmly tracking pedestrians passing along the sidewalk. People moved past, oblivious to her presence, absorbed in their daily routines. She leaned back slightly, posture relaxed but observant, quietly watching the flow of foot traffic. Across the street, Jace appeared, walking slowly down the sidewalk, hands deep in his pockets. He moved cautiously, eyes directed downward, deliberately avoiding the faces around him. His posture suggested a heaviness, his movements uncharacteristically uncertain. His uniform was absent, replaced by casual clothing that felt slightly unnatural on his frame. Ava's gaze settled on him as he approached, watching carefully, but without visible reaction. She noted the tension in his shoulders, the subtle hesitation in his step. Her expression remained neutral, revealing nothing. She made no move to greet him, or even acknowledge his presence, simply observing as he drew closer. Jace reached the edge of the cafe patio and paused briefly. For a moment, he appeared ready to look up, his chin lifting slightly, as if preparing to speak. Ava saw the hesitation clearly, but said nothing, made no welcoming gesture. Instead, she simply waited, watching him intently, eyes unwavering. He hesitated, eyes rising slowly, finally meeting Ava's gaze directly. Something shifted subtly in his expression, a recognition, acceptance, perhaps a silent admission. No words were exchanged, but the communication was clear. His mouth opened slightly, but he hesitated again, reconsidering whatever he might have said. Jace closed his mouth, lowering his head slightly in silent acknowledgement. His gaze lingered on Ava for another moment, filled with an unspoken apology he couldn't voice, a regret too complicated for words. Ava's expression remained unchanged, calm and detached. She offered neither forgiveness nor anger, only quiet observation. Slowly, deliberately, Jace moved past her, continuing down the sidewalk. His steps were measured and careful, burdened by a heavy awareness. Ava didn't turn to watch him leave, eyes fixed forward, expression still unreadable. The moment passed quietly, unnoticed by the surrounding patrons. Nearby conversations continued uninterrupted, the noise of the street filling the silence Jace left behind. Ava picked up her coffee, taking a slow sip, eyes drifting back to the sidewalk, back to the ordinary flow of people passing by. Yet, even as she returned her attention to the street, the question remained, hanging subtly in the air, unspoken but clear. Was the story truly finished, or had it only just begun? Ava stepped into the empty community center gym, the polished wooden floor reflecting bright overhead lights. Mats were neatly stacked, untouched. She placed her bag quietly on a nearby bench and glanced around, expression composed, eyes assessing the space. The room was silent. Ava took a moment to adjust her sleeves, carefully rolling them up to her elbows. She moved efficiently, preparing for class without wasting movement. The clock on the wall ticked quietly, marking each passing second distinctly. The door behind her opened slowly, hinges creaking softly. Ava turned calmly, anticipating students, her gaze settling expectantly toward the entrance. Standing in the doorway was a young girl, around 12, hesitating slightly before stepping inside. The girl paused briefly, glancing behind her as if seeking reassurance. In the hallway stood Jace, dressed casually, no badge or uniform in sight. His eyes avoided Ava's direct gaze, focused instead on his daughter as she entered the room. His posture carried a subtle tension, a reserved distance maintained respectfully from the doorway. He made no attempt to follow his daughter inside. The girl took a cautious step forward, then another. She stopped in the middle of the floor, meeting Ava's gaze with quiet determination. Ava's expression softened slightly, her eyes conveying warmth without words. She offered a small nod of acknowledgement, a simple greeting carrying a deeper, unspoken message. Jace remained motionless outside the doorway, silently watching through the narrow window in the door. He kept his hands folded tightly across his chest, his expression tense, yet hopeful. His eyes reflected a quiet humility, a willingness to accept whatever silent judgment Ava might deliver. Ava didn't look back at Jace again. Instead, she stepped calmly toward the girl, stopping just a few feet away. She observed the child quietly, assessing posture and readiness. After a moment, Ava spoke simply and directly. "Ready?" The girl nodded firmly, eyes filled with a seriousness beyond her years. Ava motioned gently toward the mats stacked against the wall. Without hesitation, the girl moved swiftly to unroll one, carefully placing it on the floor. Ava observed silently, her approval subtle, yet unmistakable. Outside, Jay shifted slightly, leaning closer to the window, still unwilling to enter. His gaze was fixed on his daughter, watching as she positioned herself confidently, awaiting Ava's instruction. His shoulders relaxed slightly, relief evident but restrained, tempered by lingering shame and uncertainty. Inside, Ava positioned herself in front of the girl, posture strong and reassuring. She demonstrated basic defensive stances, movements concise and deliberate. The girl mirrored Ava's posture carefully, determination clear in her eyes. Ava offered minimal corrections, each brief instruction purposeful and clear. The class continued quietly, rhythmic repetitions filling the gym. Jace continued watching silently, absorbing every detail without interrupting or intruding. As the lesson progressed, a quiet understanding passed between teacher and student, silent strength and resilience shared through action. Neither Ava nor Jace spoke. No apologies or forgiveness were exchanged openly. Yet something profound shifted in the quiet space between them, a silent acknowledgement of change. The cycle had been broken. They thought they could mock another person's dignity without consequence, that their badge gave them permission, authority, immunity. They assumed laughter and humiliation would break her spirit, silence her voice. But Ava had shown them something different, without words, without shouting. Just an unyielding stare, a measured step, and unspoken strength. Her quiet response exposed them in ways no loud accusation could. Without a single report filed, without a headline or public outcry, Ava forced the powerful to confront their weaknesses privately. In her silence, a louder truth emerged, resonating through the precinct corridors, unsettling those who had long abused their authority. No official judgment arrived from courts or committees, yet each officer involved faced consequences deeper than formal punishment. Shame, self-doubt, and silent rebuke settled into the spaces where arrogance once thrived. Ava didn't demand apologies or demand public justice. She simply stood firm, and in doing so, forced everyone involved to confront themselves. Ava's calm defiance proved that real power wasn't about force or intimidation. Sometimes, true strength revealed itself through restraint, patience, and quiet determination. She had no need for vengeance or loud declarations. Her silence was enough. Jace felt it deeply, standing at the threshold of that classroom, watching his daughter learn to stand as Ava did, quietly resilient, unafraid, empowered. The change was undeniable, irreversible, and deeply personal. Justice doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives in silence and stays. If you've ever stayed silent, not because you were weak, but because you were strong enough to walk away. Subscribe. This is your story too.